Nigeria has a history of constitutional evolution, with multiple constitutions preceding the current 1999 constitution, which has enacted to kickstart the Fourth Republic in Nigeria. Past efforts have included both civilian and military rule, reflecting attempts to address the country's diverse cultural and political landscape. Historical reforms have tackled issues like federalism, legislative structures, and human rights, though challenges such as political corruption and public engagement have often hindered progress. For instance, the Ninth National Assembly achieved significant reforms, including delisting the railway from exclusive list, setting precedent for current efforts. Current legislative process as of July 2025, constitutional reforms are actively underway, with the House of Representatives approving over 80 constitutional amendments about March 2025. And of course, you also know that the Senate have also proposed some creation of states. Will this scale through? These bills span 13 thematic areas. But what are the most pressing demands of the Nigerian people regarding the 1999 Constitution? This is the Eastern Eye. I'm Alex Obodo. A program that X-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. Joining me tonight on the program is Emmanuel Nwachukwu. He's a lawyer and public affairs analyst. Thank you so much, Barrister Nwachukwu, for joining me tonight on the Eastern Eye.
It's a pleasure to be on the show, Alex.
So, I mean, typically, some people that are watching, who've been observing Nigeria's democracy since 1999, will be asking themselves, what is the main objective of Nigeria's constitutional review when it looks like it never ends?
The Constitution, as the gronom of the society, is an organic instrument or document. It lives with the aspiration of the people. It grows with the strength of the people. So, when the people, as they progress, as we perfect our union and our democracy, a lot of issues come into play. So there is always need for us to look at those issues, adjust them, and see on how they could be able to conform to the present realities. So on the surface value, it feels like our constitutional review has been a recurring decimal in the political space. However, we must admit or concede to the fact that for us to have a constitution that aligns with the society or with the progress the society has been able to make, there must be need to look at that document and see how it conforms to the present realities.
There are just a few issues that are being pushed for reforms. Some of them include, but not limited to, the issues of state police, which is supposed to impact security in many places, especially in the Southeast. When the Senate Constitutional Review Committee came, it was one of the proposals made by the Enugu State Governor, talked about state police. Let's talk about state police in that sense. Do you think Nigeria is ripe for state police?
I believe we are ripe for state police. The police as an institution, we believe needs enormous reform, especially with regards to state police. For instance, in advanced democracies like the United States, we have state police like the New York police departments, and other states as well have the police settings. In Nigeria constitution and the way the templates, the way it's set up can be funny. In the guise that the governor is the chief security officer of the state, but that's where it ends. That's on paper. Realistically, some state governors always have that view, or always when push comes to shove, right? They find out that they don't even have much powers on what the police as an institution performs in their state. They still have to refer every issue to the federal, defeating the entire purpose of federalism. So an institution as state police enables the governors, being the chief security of their states, to initiate policies, security measures that will align with the security needs of each state. If everything falls back to the federal, there could be lapses either in communication or in organizational setup. For instance, during the issue of the Boko Haram menace, and during the tenure of Goodluck Jonathan, we heard what happened in Borno State when the current vice president, who was the governor then, Kashim Shettima, he was all over the news, stating the fact that he has been reaching out to the federal government even before the alleged kidnap of the Chibok girls happened. But then the federal were slow in responding to such inquiries. If there are enough apparatus on ground, I believe that the state governors could always tackle their insecurity challenges and then move on. Because without security, there's absolutely nothing a state or a government can actually execute or perform in the state.
Yeah, there's absolutely nothing they can perform or execute. But I mean, when you look at it, there are various areas, again, the issue of devolution of powers and strengthening of institutions. The Constitutional Review Committee of the House of Representatives will be having their own public hearing tomorrow at the ICC. So some of the things listed that people can submit their proposals on include issues around judicial reforms, electoral reforms, security and police, and of course, which we've just talked about. Let's talk about judicial reforms. Is it such a big thing to do? Because it looks like we've been operating in a cycle on this. You have constitutional review committees each time the National Assembly is inaugurated.
Well, we know the place of the judiciary in the society as the third arm of the government and almost the conscience of the people. It protects the rights and privileges and responsibilities of citizens and then responsibilities of the state towards the citizen. Without a viable and vibrant and effective judiciary, the state or the democratic dispensation in Nigeria will be duly affected. For instance, in the 2023 elections, after the elections were won and lost, most blames were heaped on the feet of the judiciary. They were making caricature of the members of the Supreme Court that decided the case some of the presidential candidates had against President Tinubu. Reform in the judiciary is a call for reform in the judiciary is quite timely and necessary, because as a member of the judiciary, I wouldn't be expected to say so much of a negativity about the judiciary. But the most important...
But that wouldn't stop you from calling a spade a
Exactly.
spade.
The most important thing is that from the fallout of the presidential election 2023, a lot of commentators dwell too much on technicalities, justice being slaughtered, sacrificed on the altar of technicalities. I believe if we can be able to make a reform where the judiciary will always, or most certainly, in most cases, base their decisions, base their judgment on substances of the case. For instance, talking about the Electoral Act, before you can be able to prove that someone was not validly elected as either members of the legislature or members of the executive, is always a Herculean task. Is always almost to an extent of impossibility, because you're expected to call witnesses, you're expected to tender a lot of evidence, both documentary evidences and oral evidences, and then within a time frame that does not permit you to prepare a sufficient preparation of your case. So in this guise, it is always the task expected, or the obligation expected of people trying to prosecute the electoral cases, is very much a heavy task on them. So if reforms should reflect that the judiciary should look for a subtle way to consider, so that such difficulties being observed or being undertaken or being imposed on people running for elections. At least if you lose an election, you can at least have a little bit of confidence that you can go to court and you can show the facts, and then the court wouldn't expect you to prove your case beyond reasonable doubt.
So, I mean, this is typically what happens in the country. When you look at, if someone goes to court and you are not the winner. You are not the one INEC has declared. You are on the back foot already, the way the country is, because you are the one that was asked to go to court. So you fight, you go and get your ancestors to fight for you. So just moving away from that, a lot of people are already thinking that maybe that the fate of the judiciary might not be redeemable because it's made in the executive. That whatever problem, whatever lack of independence we see, that the people who should be blamed for that is the executive. Is there any iota of opportunity for the judiciary to redeem itself?
Well, in principle, there is a principle of separation of powers, like the Constitution, Section 456, enumerated the powers of the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive. And all of them should have separated powers with sufficient checks and balances to make sure that none of them boxes or none of them controls the other organ. But then it's a funny instance because we all know that the executive play a very important role in the appointment of judicial officers. For instance, the Chief Justice of the Federation and the members of the Supreme Court, they are the members of even the Court of Appeal. They are appointed, appointed by the President with the recommendation of the NJC, and then the legislature will come, they will come before the Senate for ratification, and then their appointment will be deemed to have been proper. So, and then you're talking about allocation too. They present the allocation, and in most circumstances, the allocations are tied with the one of the executive branch. And then they depend on the executive to release funding, even though when the Constitution has already provided that there should be a revenue committee that should be in charge with the sharing of the allocation to various organs of government to maintain that separation of powers. But in practice, we have come to realize that the judiciary has always had a sole dependent on the executive against the provisions and dictates of the Constitution and the other substantive laws in the land. But then the hope is not lost for the judiciary. In the past, we have known some judges who are referred to as activists, that they have rendered decisions without fear or favor. So if we have members of the judiciary who are guided not only by the laws but by conscience to know that the rise and fall of the nation lies upon their shoulders, and then they will consider the effects or the impact of their decisions on the society, I believe we will have a reasonable cause to know or to expect that the redemption is not far away from them.
All right, we'll take a break here on the Eastern Eye. When we return, we'll find out from Barrister Nwachukwu on what he thinks about electoral reforms, whether it is possible before the next election cycle. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Eastern Eye here on AFIA TV, a program that x-rays the political, social, and economic developments around us. My name is Alex Obodo. So, Barrister Nwachukwu, let's talk about electoral reforms.
Okay.
Whatever it is Nigerians are craving for, electoral reforms seem to be at the heart of it. Because if you can have a free and fair election, it looks like you are not really telling yourself the truth. Do you think proper electoral reforms is possible in Nigeria? The argument before is that any president that effects electoral reform tends to struggle if he's seeking for re-election. They say it happened to Jonathan, but of course the other presidents are refusing to take that bold step forward.
Electoral reform, like you rightly said, is at the heart of our democracy. It starts with the leadership and the integrity of the leader. When Yar'Adua came into office in 2007, he confirmed, or he conceded to the fact that the process that brought him to the office is irregular, that there were malpractices, that there were electoral fraud and what have you. He made a devotional commitment that his administration will focus on electoral reforms. He started the process. which was later given a huge boost in the administration of President Goodluck Jonathan. However, when President Muhammadu Buhari, came into office, he made similar promises that he will effect some changes in the electoral, our electoral system and the electoral rules, so that we can be able to have, or have that confidence that the process that produce our leaders are fair and credible. However, much has been left of such promises and assurance by Muhammadu Buhari. And then Tinubu is already on another promise, another assurance of electoral reform. I don't think that it boils down for fear of re-election. I feel like it boils down on the capacity or the willingness of the said president to embark on such a program or such project. For instance, President Buhari, before the election of 2023, he gave us assurance that the election will not just be free, fair, and credible, but it will be seen to be so. And he brought out some innovations, like the card reader, the card reader, and then he said that that the process or the election results will be uploaded online, in time, so that people can be able to follow the result right from their polling units to the collection centers. But then when we got to the field, we discovered that this became mere promises and mere words, because if the cards were not working, it could be that there were other logistic issues that made it almost impracticable for such highly innovations to be put into place. And they affected the confidence people had on the results of the election. Because if, a lot of people went to the website to go and check the results, as produced, as uploaded by INEC, it became a little bit fundamentally different from the one obtained in their polling units. And whatever result that INEC could call basing on such upload, the people will always protest and say this is not actually the result that we are obtaining in our polling unit. So I believe that electoral reforms are necessary. If we are to have people that are willing to participate in the electoral process, because as it stands now, we might not, the election might not enjoy the kind of goodwill it did in 2023 when people, there were a lot of, turnout. A lot of people came in to vote and what have you, and support their various candidates. But then the morale has been lowered by the actions of both INEC and both the federal government. So I believe that it's still doable. It's still something that any administration that, that achieves that will have a lot of Nigerians to, to be in their good book. I always use the US as an instance because I'm an avid follower of US politics. We followed the election of Kamala and Donald Trump. Even before then, we saw how the elections, the results were being collected, and it was going, systematically. Even in 2020 election between Biden and Trump, that he raised some issue, of electoral irregularities. But then the system, as it was then, the people believed that the system worked. Because the system has been working, they were confident by the people that this is a working system, that whoever this system produces enjoys the goodwill of the people. So when you don't have a system that people can trust and say, okay, fine, my candidate did not win the election, but I believe that the person who won the election won the majority of votes.
Yes, but do you think, having said this, do you think that, considering how Nigerians could feel if they know they voted for Mr. A, but Mr. B is the president?
Of course, the president will be an unpopular president. He will not enjoy the support of the people. The people will always not hold him in any form of esteem, not even the lowest of esteems. His policies might not even, no matter how he tries to impress the people with his policies, the people will always say that you don't have our mandate. that you don't represent us, that whatever you are doing, you do not enjoy our support. So people, instead of responding positively to his policies or believing that, okay, this administration is not the worst that can come up, people will be lethargic about the whole incident. And when there is this kind of behavior from the electorate and from the masses, then that administration is doomed to fail.
The administration is doomed to fail. But what do you think about simultaneous elections? Because a lot of people are thinking that if you allow a presidential election to happen first, it naturally would mean that whoever emerges as president, if he's an incumbent, he will have a big influence on what happens in the gubernatorial elections. And this could be the reason why a lot of the governors are defecting to the APC, because no one wants to lose his position. Do you think that this has become a big problem that a reform can solve? But don't you think that reform will require a courageous National Assembly to deploy? And do you think that this current National Assembly will be courageous enough to deploy that reform?
To be sincere, my rating of the National Assembly has never been favorable. I think the last time I was pleased with the caliber of people we had at the National Assembly was during the Senate presidency of Saraki. We saw what was going on. We saw that the legislature was responsive to the aspirations of the people. There were no leaking asses. They were devoted to their jobs. They were not the group of, take a bow. But then you see the kind of messy stories we are hearing from the leadership of the National Assembly, like a Senate president coming on air to say that their duty or their sole responsibility is to accept or to approve whatever comes from us or whatever comes from the presidency. It makes mockery of the entire separation of powers. It makes mockery of the entire principle of checks and balances. So I'm not quite confident that the reform or the revolutionary ideas being championed in this constitutional review will enjoy or will have a National Assembly that is favorably disposed to passing such amendments into law, especially when the presidency does not look kindly with such amendments. But that having been said, it doesn't stop us from making our input through participation in the public hearing, through sending the proposal to the National Assembly. Ours is an imperfect union. Ours is a budding democracy, is a growing democracy. So we believe at the fullness of time that we could have a democratic society that will be constitutional and will be, responsive to the ideals of democracy. But as it stands now, each reform that is presently being championed in the various hearings and the various houses of assembly, the National Assembly, I think we don't have much of a courageous National Assembly.
Great. So let's talk about state and local government's creation. It's one of the things that are being considered. You already know that the Senate, they have some proposals on states that could be created, 2 from the southeast, 2 here and there. It looks like they are just deliberate about that. Do you see that happening? Because no civilian government has created any state in Nigeria. In fact, Nigeria hasn't created any state since after independence. By that, I don't mean things that happened during the military era. On created states by fiat.
Yes.
So we haven't had, in properly so-called, creation of states by meeting all the requirements of the Constitution. Do you see that happening?
It's going to be a tall order because, like you rightly stated, the Constitution make express provisions on what should be the procedure for state creation, boundary adjustment, and the creation of local government. It requires a higher degree of support. For instance, before a state could be created or carved out or a boundary adjusted or local government established, 4/5 of the members of the National Assembly must support such an amendment. We are talking about 4/5. We are talking about almost an 80% of the members of the National Assembly, unlike what we see in other constitutional amendments, which requires two-thirds majority. So it's going to be a Herculean task for the National Assembly to pull that off. And then there are a lot of competing interests. There are lots of people demanding for states. Even Adamawa and the Northeast and the other places, there is even a state that was proposed to be carved out of Adamawa.
It was Savannah.
No, it's not Savannah. It should be Gombe. Is it Amal or something?
Anana.
Something like that. So then you come to Enugu State, we have Adada. Then you come even to Abia State. Almost all the regions, all the geopolitical zones, and all the states.
From what the Senate released was Adada and I think what did they call it again? I think is it Anim? Okay, Adada and Anim. They're taking it from Anambra and the Imo.
Exactly. So if you consider all these competing interests from the various geopolitical zones and states, it could be a little bit difficult for those interests, to be united in saying, okay, this state should be created, this other state should be created, because you can't just come to the Southeast and create two states, even though I know that we are surcharged by having 5 states against other geopolitical zones, and create 2 states, and then the North Central and the Northwest are there, and the Northeast are there, and all of them are looking at you and say, oh boy, what are you doing? Don't we deserve a state too? Because state creation is not just the periphery of saying, okay, let's just create a state. There are other interests attached to it. For instance, it will mop up the members of the National Assembly.
That's right.
From the state, and then the other interests like federal character will be taken into consideration, and the other benefits that will accrue to a state. So Nigeria is a very polarized area. So the issue of state creation might seem, we might not actually have a unanimous agreement in order to push that move. But then I believe that with a lot of collaboration and consideration, if the governors, for instance, the Pitamba, he's pushing for other states, if other governors, he could be able to rally support from his colleagues who can, reach out to their members in the National Assembly. And, never can tell. It could be a reality.
So, let's take a look at the Southeast now. Who do you think has a very realistic proposal for a state as we speak now? If a state should be created, if the president has the powers to close his eyes and say, okay, I give you a state in the Southeast, where should it be?
Well, I wouldn't want to be sentimental about it, but then I think other state is ripe to be called a state, because there are a lot of factors you consider when you are talking about a state. For instance, you are talking about a known boundary, right? So if you are talking about we are talking about Enugu North Senatorial District, and then there is a clear boundary demarcation, between Enugu North and other parts of Enugu. And then they have other incidences that could make them a viable state. They have arable lands, if they are talking about IGR. And then they have a very competing population, both youthful population, and then the demography and everything supports the creation or the carving out of such a state. And we are talking about Enugu, and we have barely 17 local government, considering other local government. So with the 6 local government in the Enugu North Senatorial District, I think, without being biased or without being sentimental about it, that Ada deserves or should at least be recognized in the equation when we are talking about state creation.
So, do you consider that now to be acceptable to the Southeast? Do you get this reverberation? Or is this just something that is coming out here because you are closer to the other landscape?
I believe that this discussion has always been on the front burner. We have been hearing of Ada for a while, and I believe that if the political class, led by the governor, is akin to making, or is moved or inspired to make such a move happen, he can get his colleagues, the fellow governors, and I enjoy the rapport between the governors for now. Last week he was in Abia to visit the governor, and then he has been having good working relationship with most of his colleagues in the Southeast. So I think if he could push Adada as a state, as a project, as a personal project, that other governors might be likely to drop their own quest for a state and then queue behind him, because we cannot say the Southeast that we are moving for probably 2 or 3 or putting different eggs in different baskets. It's better we come together, we get one basket, we put all our eggs and watch the basket carefully and handle it with care. So if we can be able to come together as a people, as people, bound by same tradition and the same practice and the same tongue, and say we want Adada, we want this one state, I think is possible.
It's absolutely possible. But I mean, let's take a look at generally how the constitutional review process is proceeding. Do you think, from what you've seen so far, that you are really convinced that this could happen this time?
We have a plethora of former amendment procedure, even national, constitutional, councils and all. And then I think last 2 weeks there were a group of Nigerians. They go by the name Patriot, and they said they were having their own conference. They invited a lot of dignitaries, and then a lot of people are members of such movements too, and they are trying to see how best they could come out with a constitution that actually reflects.
Do you consider the Patriot group elitist?
Yes, definitely it is.
Do you think that the Patriot group really reflects the yearnings of Nigerians at the lowest level?
I don't think so.
Or is this about high-sounding headlines and
I don't think so. I think
poetic speeches?
I think it's more of intellectualism.
That's what it is, isn't it?
Yes, I think it's more of, okay, this is for what we feel that will be beneficial to Nigerians. We are learned, we're educated. We could actually think for the greater majority of the people. And exactly this is what got us to where we are. Because the military felt that they knew better. And then when they said that we, the people of Nigeria, give ourselves this constitution, is ironic. Because the greater percentage of the country don't see the constitution as the will of the people. You can't compare with the American constitution that has the same similar line that say we, the people, So because the people can always say that our consultations, there were not sufficient consultations, our opinions were not sought. So, and I think this is actually what this constitutional review fails or tends to do, because they are going from region to region trying to elicit the opinions of the people in order to have the mandate of the people. But then we are talking about almost 86 items on the review. So it's not just superfluous. I think that it could always mean that we might not have a structured review, So I think that the review could be a success in some aspects, in some items like the devolution of power, so that we can at least, pretend to practice federalism. And then the issue of state police. And then there's another cardinal issue, which is local government autonomy, which has been a critical issue in the society, because we have a lot of governors that consider the local government as one of the departments in the executive, in the state apparatus. They don't see it as an independent setup recognized in the 4th schedule of the Constitution, which have their own powers, which has their own life apart, very far or very different from the state. So I believe that if such german issues are handled, state police, devolution of powers, the autonomy of local government autonomy, inclusiveness of the women in the politics, and all these cardinal issues, then I believe that Nigeria will be a better place.
Nigeria will be a better place. That's our wish and our prayer. Thank you so much, Barrister Emmanuel Nwachukwu, for talking to us tonight on the Eastern Eye.
It's a pleasure.
And that's the Eastern Eye for tonight. Thank you for watching. And from me and the production team, my name is Alex Obodo. Good night.